This is the Ronin Philosopher, where I take a look at martial arts and try to examine them from a philosophical point of view that involves culture, pop culture, and styles. People will take martial arts for a variety of reasons, and one of the main ones is for self-defense. Given its roots and practicality and movesets, this is no surprise. It was one of the reasons I took it up as a teenager and remains one of my passions to this day. So much so that I often watch martial arts videos on YouTube. The creators vary from random practitioners in their garages and basements to full-on self-proclaimed quote-unquote masters and experienced fighters talking about knife defense and katas. One statement I heard a karate master say when he was asked if he could stop a bullet was yes, by taking out the shooter. One of the things I noticed in the comment sections was an ongoing debate about how effective it really was, however, especially when it applied to women's self-defense. The debate usually takes two sides, with one promoting how effective the techniques are, while the other often scoffs at them for being too influenced by Hollywood, and that people should just get a gun. I even had a short debate on it with someone at a bar saying that he owned a gun and had no real need for learning how to fight. Without thinking, I found myself being quite defensive about it at the time. I initially thought that the guy was just being purposefully ignorant. However, as time wore on, I learned about practitioners' inherent id complex and how it often comes into play with scoffers, particularly myself. Once I got my ego out of the way, however, I found a pretty balanced and underlying truth concerning not only self-defense martial arts, but other methods as well, like guns, mace, and other weaponry. My realization was that each method of protection has their benefits, but also their own weaknesses. Seems like an obvious statement, but how often have you heard a martial artist, no matter the level, openly discuss scenarios where their cherished preferences can fail them? So, let's start with the obvious. Buy a gun. I feel this is definitely an option, and there are plenty of schools that train people on how to properly use a gun, like shooting for the main body on a person rather than a smaller target. A second plus is that guns definitely are more openly intimidating, and would give most people pause before attacking because of their presumed instant lethality. Even an untrained user knows that unless you are very drugged up, any hit from a bullet is going to take you down, no questions asked. Bruce Lee is said to have bought a gun because of his growing paranoia about unknown people surprising him and challenging him. So the guy I spoke with at the bar about his pride in having a gun and not needing anything else as well is pretty validated. Yet there is also a downside, though not like what the karate master had said, which by the way I also thought was pretty arrogant. First, in order for your gun to be effective, you have to first have it with you. The man at the bar did not have his gun with him at the time I was talking to him. So if someone, for whatever reason, decided to jump him, he would have to fight. There are places that unless you're a cop or military, you are not allowed to have a gun with you at all times. So to do so regardless comes off as very paranoid. Another downside is that most attackers are going to try to come at you without being seen until very, very close. If the training is good, teachers may teach you how to handle a quick draw situation like that, and to quickly create distance to draw the weapon. Even still though, it comes perilously close to a hand-to-hand engagement. As well, it can make the victim too dependent on one style of self-defense, leaving them particularly vulnerable when that defense happens to fail or when they're surprised or it's neutralized. The third downside that I found with gun defense is even if your attacker comes directly at you, there's also a good chance that it might be more than one person. Presuming they are in your line of sight, you may get off one or two shots, but the second you shoot at one person, the others will come at you, and that leads to the final downside, that the attacker is also equally armed. As seen in nature, initial fear can be lessened when there are greater numbers to diffuse that danger. Depending on where you are, getting a gun is as easy as going to Walmart to get food, literally. Someone mugging you on the street or robbing your house may also be armed with something as well, and then the outcome becomes less certain. If more than one attacker is armed, then the odds are even less in your favor. So, as long as the gun owner is aware of these limitations, they can take steps to stay out of those scenarios and maximize their strengths. Now on to the strengths of martial self-defense. Some of the strengths of martial arts are the opposite of owning a weapon. Being trained in hand-to-hand combat can give you a higher chance of survival in the close range arena. Situations like being jumped and not being armed are less likely to leave you feeling like, what do I do? Another benefit is that it's not a weapon in the strictest sense of a word. You're not going to get arrested for knowing how to defend yourself. It's low key, and you don't have to worry about bringing it to other places as well, as it would come up only into play during assault cases. Thirdly, in case that you actually do have to fight, it doesn't have to be an automatic lethal scenario. Saves you less legal issues with the cops, though there may be times where you may have to go the lethal option. I saw a Krav Maga instructor give a lesson on the body targets where they were divided into 3 degrees of lethality. Lastly, because martial self-defense is low-key in nature, it can be modified to other facets of your life should you like to exercise or do meditation. Basically, it's not a one-trick pony as carrying a gun would be. However, even this method of self-defense has its weaknesses, many being shared with gun-wielding defenders as well. No matter what teachers say, no matter their experience, background, or size, no physical encounter is a foregone conclusion because you know how to fight. Any fight in any circumstances that can go a number of different ways once hands are thrown. This isn't like Hollywood or MMA matches where you know everything is scripted or you know everything you need to know about your attacker or attackers. Whether you are armed or equally trained, or if it's more than one-on-one, overconfidence can get you killed here as much as it can if you have a gun. Another problem with martial self-defense is multiple attackers, just like with guns. Any fight involving 2 or more people versus 1 puts that defender at an immediate disadvantage. To be fair, there are live videos where people have been able to fight under those conditions and come out alive. However, like I said before, they are not foregone conclusions. And had 1 or 2 factors been different in that second, it could have gone very badly. The next weakness is the range factor. If your attacker has a gun on you, and if they have half a brain, then they probably have a good few feet on you to stay out of range of your limbs. This is in fact the most common argument against martial arts self-defense, used by gun proponents, and it's absolutely legit. Another fair point to that side is the physical factor. A person's size, height, and weight are definitely elements to consider, and if I have one criticism of many self-defense teachers, it's their assumption that all attackers are the same height. Physical attributes will inform on how that person is going to move. For example, a smaller person may be more reckless, frenzied, and armed to make up for their lack of size and the power by sheer tenacity alone, whereas a bigger attacker is going to be more reliant on their strength to carry them through whatever the other opponent or victim may throw at them. They also may be more confident to the point of arrogance because of physical superiority and less aware of their own vulnerable points. 2 fights are never alike. This is also where women's self-defense is criticized as well. Mostly by men, they will point out these biological differences and blame Hollywood for putting the idea in their heads that they have a chance in hell against stronger males. I think there's more going on with them than just an objective critique lesson, but despite that, it is also true that most modern Western films that portray women in action roles either ignore or play down these factors for the sake of avoiding the sand trap of women being the weaker sex, and thereby implying that they should just lay down and take it or not even bother trying to fight back. So here I think is the unbiased truth of effective and ineffective self-defense. First is that there are environmental and biological factors that are above either side. I have seen and sparred with women who can handle themselves pretty well in a fight. Never underestimate the effectiveness of a deep and solid kick to the groin, or having it grabbed and crushed, or getting your eyes gouged out. Yet there are also experiences where the women couldn't effectively do anything either, because of that physical difference. Whenever people thought I was armed, they were much less inclined to escalate a fight with me than if I wasn't. However, it has also led to issues with cops who thought the same thing. No matter the method, the outcome is always dependent on the razor's edge of people's choices and the factors that empower those choices as well. Here's another unfettered truth, is that there is no such thing as a one-shot solution when it comes to self-defense. Both sides are equally guilty of this, and they often ignore their preferences' limitations to empower that myth. Something that works open on the streets may not work in a subway or during a home invasion. Practitioners of both methods need to be trained to adapt to situations outside of their chosen fields as well as within them. Honestly, I think that if someone really wants to be prepared, then you should have training in both. Situational awareness and how to read body language would also be extremely beneficial to help avoiding to have to defend yourself in the first place. Just as there is nothing wrong with doing one or the other individually, there is also nothing wrong with doing both. While no self-defense is guaranteed to work all the time, there is also nothing wrong with being prepared either. The more you know, the higher percentage of your survival.